Brilliance Audio presents the unabridged recording of The London Eye Mystery by Siobhan Dowd, performed by Alex Kalasic. For Donal. Chapter 1. A Giant Bicycle Wheel in the Sky. My favorite thing to do in London is to fly the eye. On a clear day, you can see for 25 miles in all directions because you are in the largest observation wheel ever built. You are sealed into one of the 32 capsules with the strangers who were next to you in the queue, and when they close the doors, the sound of the city is cut off. You begin to rise. The capsules are made of glass and steel and are hung from the rim of the wheel. As the wheel turns, the capsules use the force of gravity to stay upright. It takes 30 minutes to go a full circle. From the top of the ride, Kat says London looks like Toy Town, and the cars on the roads below look like abacus beads going left and right and stopping and starting. I think London looks like London, and the cars like cars, only smaller. The best thing to see from up there is the River Thames. You can see how it loops and curves, but when you are on the ground you think it is straight. The next best thing to look at is the spokes and the metallic hawsers of the eye itself. You are looking at the only cantilevered structure of its kind on Earth. It is designed like a giant bicycle wheel in the sky, supported by a massive A-frame. It is also interesting to watch the capsules on either side of yours. You see strangers looking out, just like you are doing. The capsule that is higher than yours becomes lower than yours, and the capsule that is lower becomes higher. You have to shut your eyes because it makes a strange feeling go up your esophagus. You are glad the movement is smooth and slow. And then your capsule goes lower, and you are sad because you do not want the ride to end. You would like to go around one more time, but it's not allowed. So you get out feeling like an astronaut coming down from space, a little lighter than you were. We took Salim to the eye because he'd never been up before. A stranger came up to us in the queue offering us a free ticket. We took it and gave it to Salim. We shouldn't have done this, but we did. He went up on his own at 11:32:24 May and was due to come down at 12:02 the same day. He turned and waved to Kat and me as he boarded, but you couldn't see his face, just his shadow. They sealed him in with 20 other people whom we didn't know. Kat and I tracked Salim's capsule as it made its orbit. When it reached its highest point, we both said, "Now," at the same time, and Kat laughed and I joined in. That's how we knew we'd been tracking the right one. We saw the people bunch up as the capsule came back down, facing northeast towards the automatic camera for the souvenir photograph. They were just dark bits of jackets, legs, dresses, and sleeves. Then the capsule landed. The doors opened and the passengers came out in twos and threes. They walked off in different directions. Their faces were smiling. Their paths probably never crossed again. But Salim wasn't among them. We waited for the next capsule, and the next, and the one after that. He still didn't appear. Somewhere, somehow, in the 30 minutes of riding the eye, in his sealed capsule, he had vanished off the face of the Earth. This is how having a funny brain that runs on a different operating system from other people's helped me to figure out what had happened. Chapter 2. News of a Hurricane. It started the day the letter from Aunt Gloria arrived. Aunt Gloria is my mum's sister. Mum calls her Glo, and Kat calls her Auntie Glo. Dad calls her Hurricane Gloria because he says she leaves a trail of devastation in her wake. I asked him what this meant. Did it mean she was clumsy like I am? He said it wasn't so much things that she upset, which wouldn't be so bad, more people and emotions. Does that mean she is evil, I asked. Dad said she didn't do it on purpose, so no, she wasn't evil, she was just a handful. I asked him what being a handful meant, and he said it meant being larger than life. When I tried to ask what being larger than life meant, he put his hand on my shoulder. "Not now, Ted," he said. The morning Aunt Gloria's letter came was the same as any other. I heard the post drop as usual on the doormat. I was on Shreddy number 3, and the radio weather forecast was saying it was set fair, but with a risk of showers in the southeast. Kat was eating toast standing up, wriggling. It wasn't that she had fleas, although that is what it looked like. She was listening to her weirdo music on headphones. which meant she wouldn't hear the weather and wouldn't wear a raincoat or bring her umbrella to school, which meant that she would get wet, and I wouldn't, and this was good. Dad was hopping around in one sock, complaining about how the washing machine had eaten all his socks and he was late. Mum was looking through the laundry bag for a spare. "Ted, get the post," Mum said. She was in her nurse's uniform, and even I know that when her words come out short and sharp like that, you do what she asks, even though I hate leaving my shreddies to turn to mush. I came back with 6 envelopes. Kat saw me and snatched them off me and picked out a big brown envelope and a small white one. I could see our school emblem on the white one. It is like a squashed-up X, and over it is a bishop's hat, which is called a mitre. Kat tried to hide it behind the big brown envelope, but Mum saw her. "Not so fast, Katrina," Mum said. When Mum calls Kat Katrina, you know the trouble is coming. Kat's lips pressed up tight. She handed over the post, all items except the brown envelope, which she held up for all to see that it was addressed to her, Katrina Spark. She opened it and a catalogue came out. It was called Hair Flare. She walked over to the door, head nodding. I ate shreddies number 7 through 17. Dad started humming the theme tune of Laurel and Hardy, his favorite thing to watch on TV. He'd got the other sock on, and was buttering toast, and his hair stood on end, and Mum would have said he looked the spit of Stan. The spit is a way to say exactly like, but don't ask me why. Anyway, Stan has brown hair, and Dad's hair is fair like mine, so he doesn't look exactly like Stan at all. "Katrina?" Mum bellowed. The 18th shreddy fell off my spoon. "What?" "This letter from your school." "What letter from my school?" "This letter, the one you tried to hide." "What about it?" "It says you were missing last week without a sick note last Tuesday." "Oh, yeah." "Well?" "Well, what?" "Where were you?" "She was AWOL, Mum," I suggested. Kat and Mum stared at me. "AWOL, like in the army," I explained. "Absent without leave." "Get stuffed, you creep," Kat hissed. She went out and slammed the door after her. The radio program switched back to the news. "Turn that thing off, Ted," Mum said. I fiddled with the knob, but she pulled the plug out of the socket instead. There was silence. I heard Dad munching some toast. "She's going off the rails, Ben," Mum said to Dad. "Off the rails," I repeated, thinking of train accidents. I suppose Mum was saying something about Katrina being AWOL. Maybe off the rails was another way of saying skiving, which means not going to school when you should. But I didn't dare check, not with Mum in that mood. "Off the rails, and nobody cares," she said. "I used to bunk off at her age," Dad said. "I'd spend the day riding buses and smoking fags in the park." My 20th shreddy nearly went down the wrong way. The thought of Dad with a cigarette in hand was very strange. He never smokes now. Dad tapped Mum's shoulder, and when she looked up at him, he kissed her on the middle of her forehead. It gave off a funny squeak that nearly put me off the rest of my shreddies. "Let's discuss it tonight, Faith. I've got to run. There's a meeting about blowing up the barracks." Mum's lips went up a bit. "Okay, love, later." I should explain here that Dad is not a terrorist who goes around blowing up the places where soldiers live. He is a demolition expert, and the barracks was the local name for Barrington Heights, the tallest tower block in our South London borough. It used to be where people who are socially excluded lived. Being socially excluded is a bit like being excluded from school. Instead of a head teacher telling you you have to leave, it's more that everybody in the rest of society acts like you don't exist, and you end up with all the other people who are being ignored. And you're so angry that society is treating you like this that you take drugs and shoplift and form gangs in revenge. And the people in Barrington Heights used to do all those things. Dad said it was not that the people were bad to begin with. He said the building was sick and made them sick too, a bit like a virus. So he and the council had decided to move them to new homes and blow up the building and start again. Dad got his jacket on. He said, "Goodbye, Ted," to me and went out. Then Mum sat down again and went through the rest of the post. She got to the last piece, a pale lilac envelope. I saw her holding it to her nose and sniffing it, as if it was edible. Then she smiled. Her lips went right up, but her eyes went watery. This meant that she was sad and happy at the same time. "Glory be," she whispered. She opened it and read what was inside. I ate my last 3 shreddies, numbers 35 through 37. She put down the lilac sheet of paper and ruffled the top of my head, a thing she does sometimes which makes my hand shake itself out. "Hold tight, Ted," she said. "A hurricane's coming." "No, it isn't," I said. "We're moving into a large anticyclone. I'm a meteorologist, or will be when I grow up, so I know hurricanes die out halfway across the Atlantic. They rarely hit Britain. Even the one in 1987 wasn't technically a hurricane. The weatherman called Michael Fish, who was famous for getting it wrong, actually got it right. It was only a bad storm, and it had no name. A real hurricane is always given a name, like Hannah, which gusted up to 160 miles an hour in 1957, or Hugo, which flattened half of South Carolina in the USA in 1989, or Hurricane Katrina, a Category 5 storm which devastated New Orleans in 2005. I am sure it is no coincidence that one of the most catastrophic storms of all time has the same name as my sister. "I don't mean it literally," Mum said, whisking my empty cereal bowl away from me. "It's Hurricane Gloria who's on her way, my sister, remember? She's coming to visit us along with her son Salim. The ones who live in Manchester?" "That's right. It's been more than 5 years since we saw them, Ted. I just don't know where the time's gone." It sounded like she thought time was something that comes and goes like the weather. I shook my head. "No, Mum," I explained. "Time doesn't go anywhere." "It does in this house, Ted. Down a bloody black hole." I blinked at her, trying to figure out if she might have a point. She laughed and said she was joking and ruffled my hair again. "Go on, Ted. Off to school with you." So I went on my zigzag way across the common, thinking about time, black holes, Einstein's theory of relativity, and storm warnings. I imagined Hurricane Gloria building up force as it drew nearer, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. My thoughts were so good that I nearly ended up walking into the pond on the wrong side of the common, and got to school only just on time. "Down a black hole," I said to myself as I ran across the playground. My hand shook itself out. Down a bloody black hole. Chapter 3. The Hurricane Approaches. That night, Mum read out Aunt Gloria's letter. I tried to find it so I could quote it word for word, but Mum said it had probably been thrown out because our house is too small to hoard things. I remember it went something like this. "Dear Faith," that's my mum. "I want to make up. I'm sorry we argued last time I visited. Salim and I are about to move to New York City, where I have been offered a job as an art curator. Please, can we come and stay with you for 1 or 2 nights in the half-term holiday on our way to the airport? I know your house is small, but we can squeeze in somehow. Salim says he can sleep on the ironing board." Kat has just told me that this is not in Aunt Gloria's style. Aunt Gloria, she says, writes with much more elaborate words. According to Kat, she lets it all hang out. I'm not sure what this means. Kat wrote down what she remembered of the letter, and this is her version. "Darling, dearest Faith, I'm so sorry not to have been in touch more. Life has been horribly hectic, and the years have flown by like so many swallows in the sky. I really regret how we argued last time. It has been eating away at my soul. I can hardly remember now what it was all about. But I was a total mess then, having just split up with Salim's dad and not yet having discovered transcendental meditation. I'm much more centered now. I have some exciting news. I've been offered a high-powered job as an art curator in New York. Isn't that fabulous? Salim and I have decided to go for it. Salim is 13 now and very grown up. He is not happy at school here. He only has one friend who's half Asian like him, and the other boys pick on him. So it's the Big Apple for us, a big, exciting adventure in our fascinating voyage through life. Can we drop by your place on the way, just for a night or 2, darling? I know your house is small, but Salim is dead keen to meet his cousins again. He says he can sleep on the ironing board. So the only thing Kat and I both remember is the part about the ironing board. After Mum read out the letter, Dad groaned and put his head in his hands. Kat said Auntie Glo sounded insane, and I said that Salim must be tiny if he could expect to sleep on an ironing board. This made Kat, Dad, and Mum laugh. My hand shook itself out, and a bad feeling went up my esophagus. I had been caught out again. It was like the time I had asked why footballers were still being kept as slaves when slavery had been abolished, after a newsreader announced that a Manchester United star had been bought by another club for £12 million. When they all stopped laughing at me, Dad said, "Did we have to say yes?" and Mum said, "Yes, we did." Kat asked where everyone was going to sleep. Mum said that Aunt Gloria must have Kat's room, and Kat said, "No way, Mum." Mum said Kat would just have to lump it, and it served her right for having skivved off school, because a girl who skivs isn't entitled to make a fuss about sleeping on the couch for a night or two. Kat folded her arms, and her lips went inside her teeth. "What about Salim?" I said, eyeing where the ironing board was propped against the kitchen wall. "He'll share with you, Ted. We can blow up the Lilo." I looked at Kat. I knew from the way her face was that she was angry. I wasn't angry, but I felt a bad pain starting in my stomach. It was the thought of a strange boy coming into my room at night and having to hear him breathe when the lights were off, and him seeing me get changed into my pajamas and not being able to listen to the shipping forecast late at night like I do when I can't sleep. I said, with my hand flapping. "Too right," Kat said. "Ah, bloody ha-ha." "You'll probably end up arguing again," Dad said to Mum. He sounded like a weatherman when he's predicting a really bad storm. I have looked in the thesaurus for the right word, and it is gleeful. "No, we won't," said Mum, "because I won't let it happen, not this time. I'll just take a deep breath every time she says something annoying, and in my mind's eye I'll meditate on the shape of a teapot. And since she'll be doing the same, we'll get along fine." I tried meditating on a teapot in my mind's eye, but all I saw was hot water spilling out from the spout and coming straight at me like a scalding hot tsunami wave, which is how the thought of Aunt Gloria coming and Salim sleeping in my room made me feel. A real hurricane would have been much better. Chapter 4. The hurricane makes landfall. Aunt Gloria and Salim came at 6:24 p.m. on Sunday, 23 May, the start of our one-week half-term holiday. It was a fine day with some scattered showers moving northeast. Kat and I watched as a black London cab pulled up outside our house. Aunt Gloria came out first. She was tall and thin, with straight black hair cut to her shoulders. Kat says the style is called a bob. She wore tight jeans and dark pink sandals. You couldn't help notice her two big toes sticking out from the gap, because they were painted with matching dark pink nail polish and were very bright. But the thing I noticed most was the cigarette holder she had in her hand. A long, slim cigarette was stuck in the end, and it was lit. A trail of smoke floated up from it. Kat said Aunt Gloria looked like a fashion editor. Kat has never met a fashion editor, so I don't know how she knew this. Salim was tall and thin, with jeans on, like his mother. He wore an ordinary backpack and wheeled Aunt Gloria's suitcase on wheels behind him. His black hair was cut short. His skin was brown. Kat says it was not just brown, but caramel. She says I should say that he was very good-looking. She is always thinking about whether people are good-looking or not. I think people just look like who they are. I suppose I am ugly because nobody has ever said I am handsome. People are always saying how pretty Kat is, so I suppose she is. To me, she just looks like Kat. So I don't know if Salim was handsome, but he looked like his thoughts were not in the same place as his body, and I like this about him. I think this is how I often look too. He and Aunt Gloria walked up to our front door, through the front garden, which Mum says is the size of a postage stamp. In fact, it's 3 meters by 5, and I once worked out that it could fit 22,500 stamps. Before they had a chance to ring the doorbell, Mum flung open the front door. "Glo," she said. "Faye," Aunt Gloria shrieked. There was a muddle of arms and laughing, and I wished I could go up to my room. Behind them Salim stood looking on. His eye and my eye met. Then he lifted his shoulders, gazed up at the sky, and shook his head. Then he smiled straight at me, which meant that he and I could become friends. And that felt good. I only had 3 other friends, and they were all grown up. They were Mum, Dad, and Mr. Shepherd, my teacher at school. I didn't count Kat as my friend because she was rude to me most of the time and interrupted me when I spoke. "Ted," Mum was saying, "say hello to your Auntie Glo." I looked at Aunt Gloria's left ear. "Hello, Aunt Gloria." I put my hand out for her to shake. She dragged me into a hug that smelled of cigarettes and perfume and made my nostrils itchy. "Hello, Ted," she said. "Just call me Glo, won't you? That's what everyone calls me." I escaped from between her arms. "God, Faith," she went on. "He's this bit of our father. Do you remember? Dad in his suit and tie, even on holiday. Ted's the image of him." There was a silence. It was true that I wore my school trousers and shirt every day, even if I wasn't going to school. It's what I like to do. Kat was always on at me to put on a t-shirt and jeans and be normal and chilled, but that made me want to wear my uniform even more. Salim said, "No, Mum, he looks a right cool dude. The formal look's all the rage again, didn't you know?" I said. "The look's a disguise, Mum. It hides the rebel within, right, Ted?" I nodded. It felt good being called a rebel. "Hey, Ted, shake hands." As I shook hands, we were eyeball to eyeball, and I felt my head going off to one side in what Kat calls my duck that's forgotten how to quack look. "Welcome to London, Salim," I said. Kat pushed me aside. "Hey, Salim," she said, holding out her hand. "That's some accent you have. Is that how you folks talk up north?" "Hey, Kat," said Salim, taking her hand. "Is that how you lot talk down south?" Everyone laughed their heads off, which is not literally what happened, but I like the idea of laughing heads becoming detached from bodies through extreme hilarity, so it is a good way to describe things. I didn't know what was funny, but I laughed too. Mr. Shepherd says it is a good idea to laugh when others do, as it means you can fit in and become friends. "How come you talk all South London-y?" Salim continued. "And Ted sounds like the BBC." "That's a very good question, Salim," Mum said. "Not even Ted's neurologist can explain it. But come through to the kitchen, everyone. Dinner's ready." In the kitchen, Mum had extended the table to its full length of nearly 2 meters so that 6 could fit around it. But as the skinniest person, I had to squeeze in at the far end with my back to the patio door. Mum had covered the surface with a white tablecloth and had made me lay it because that was my job. Then Kat went round checking I'd put everything the right way round. This was unnecessary, as I'm very good at laying tables. I think of the knife, spoon, and fork as an electric current. The knife feeds the end of the spoon, and the front of the spoon feeds the prongs of the fork, and the table edge is the last part. And between each object is a 90-degree angle, so the circuit becomes a perfect square. And if you do it that way, nothing ever goes wrong. Kat had put flowers from the front garden in a glass vase in the middle, and a wooden board with stacks of bread. She'd put out our best tumblers for drinks and folded up paper serviettes into them so that each one stood up over the glass rim like a mitre, our school emblem. She added wine glasses for Dad, Mum, and Aunt Gloria. She tried putting one at her own place, but Mum whisked it away and called Kat Madam Minx, which is what she calls Kat when she is annoyed with her, but only moderately. We all sat down. Mum served out chicken casserole, one of my favorite things to eat, from a big orange pot. Aunt Gloria talked a lot. She said she and Salim were dead excited to be leaving Manchester, as they'd had enough of the rain. I tried to point out that the number of wet hours in the north was far less than people realized, but she had already moved on to what a dead fast city New York was. I knew by then how people often say dead when they mean very, so I didn't need to ask about that. But I did ask how a city could be fast. "Well, Ted," she said, "everything in New York moves in quick motion, like a film speeded up. People, cars, even the underground trains. They have express trains that flash past the boring stops. When you're there, you feel as if time itself is rushing by at twice the normal rate. Which means, Mum, Salim said, you'll grow old twice as fast in Manhattan. Aunt Gloria laughed. She put an arm out and touched Salim's shoulder. He's such a joker, my boy. Salim's eyes stared at the tablecloth, and I saw his lips move, but no sound came out. Then he saw me looking at him, and his eyes looked up to the ceiling, and he tapped his temple and pointed at Aunt Gloria, grinning. Kat said later that this was body language for how Salim thought his mother was crazy. Next he took a mobile phone out of his pocket and put it next to his plate and looked at it very seriously. Mum passed Aunt Gloria the bread. Aunt Gloria said she was off wheat of all kinds because of being on a gluten-free diet. My nutritionist swears by it, she said. Aunt Gloria, I said. I took a slice for myself. Wouldn't it be better for your health to give up cigarettes? Dad coughed as if something had gone down the wrong way. I read some interesting figures yesterday. If everyone in Britain gave up smoking, the National Health Service would save... Ted, Mum said. Aunt Gloria chuckled. No, Faye, Ted's right to ask. Trouble is, Ted, I'm totally hooked on nicotine and can take or leave bread. She looked over to Kat. You don't smoke, do you, Kat? Kat twisted her serviette around on itself. Course not. I frowned because I'd seen Kat with a cigarette in her mouth with her school friends only the week before. But Kat, that's... What do you think about going to New York, Salim? Kat interrupted. Salim hunched up his shoulders and smiled, but he didn't look up from his mobile. He'll love it, said Aunt Gloria. I just know it. The Empire State Building, the Chrysler. Salim adores big buildings. He wants to be an architect one day. Isn't that right, love? Yeah, I suppose, Salim said. His mobile started ringing with the theme music of James Bond. He said, Excuse me, and rushed away from the table and out into the hall to answer it. This time I saw Aunt Gloria's eyes go up to the ceiling. While Salim was gone, a conversation started about what we should do tomorrow. Dad had to go to work, but Mum had the day off from being a nurse, and it was half-term, so the 5 of us could go sightseeing, she said. Kat wanted to ride a riverboat. I wanted to visit the Science Museum. Mum wanted to go to Covent Garden to see the buskers. Aunt Gloria wanted to go to all the art museums. Salim returned, putting his mobile back in his pocket. Salim should decide, Dad said. He's the visitor. He wants to go up to the Tate Modern, don't you? Aunt Gloria suggested. Salim doubled over with groans and writhed like he had been poisoned. I got to my feet in a panic and nearly put my elbow through the glass patio door. Everyone else laughed. He's such a practical joker, Aunt Gloria said. Salim stood straight up again, looking normal. He stroked the fine line of small dark hairs above his lip. Mum, he said, please, not another art gallery. But the Tate Modern's different. It's an old power station with a vast chimney, and tall with a capital T. Yeah, but it's full of art. Salim, I said, if you're a practical joker, what's a theoretical joker? Salim considered. Someone who just thinks about playing jokes but never actually does them. I nodded. That made me the theoretical kind. I often think of pranks I could play on Kat, like telling her that a tsunami is scheduled to come up the Thames at 12:30 and ruin her hairdo, but I never carry them out. What about the zoo? Mum said. Or the aquarium? They're not very tall, I said. No, agreed Salim. He scrunched up his eyebrows. I have it. Let's go to the London Eye. The London Eye? Said Kat. We've been up twice, Salim. It's fantastic. And it's tall, I said. Taller than the Ferris wheel in Vienna. Technically speaking, it's not a Ferris wheel. It's designed more like a bicycle wheel, a giant bicycle wheel in the sky. It rotates once every 30 minutes and Kat kicked my shin, which meant she wanted me to stop talking. Great, said Salim. That's what I want to do, like Ted says. Fly the bicycle wheel in the sky, please, Mum. Supposing it's cloudy tomorrow? It won't be, Aunt Gloria, I said. We're in the middle of a large anticyclone, and the weather is set fair. But the queues! Please, Mum, said Salim. You and Auntie Faye can go and have coffee. Ted, Kat, and I will line up and get the tickets, please. Oh, okay. Only afterwards we'll take a little look at the Tate. All that art in a vast industrial space. I'd like to show Ted the Andy Warhols. He was an American pop artist who made pictures from adverts and famous people, like Campbell's tomato soup tins and Marilyn Monroe. I've heard of him, said Kat. He was a weirdo. He was a cultural icon, said Aunt Gloria. I'd say he embodied the 20th century. Some people even think he might have had... She looked at Mum. You know, what Ted's got. There was a silence. Like I said, Kat said, a weirdo. Mum's lips pressed up tight. I figured out that Kat had made her cross, but I didn't care. I know I'm a weirdo. My brain runs on a different operating system from other people's. I see things they don't, and sometimes they see things I don't. As far as I'm concerned, if Andy Warhol was like me, then one day I'd be a cultural icon too. Instead of soup cans and movie stars, I'd be famous for my weather charts and formal suits, and that would be good. It's a deal, Salim said. Art gallery second, the wheel first. Which is how we decided on the London Eye, or as Salim called it, the wheel.